Good evening, everyone in Sri Lanka, and good morning to you, Professor Thomas Reeves from the USA. Welcome to the faculty seminar on creating authentic online learning through educational design research. This is the sixth and the final webinar of the series of faculty seminars organized in relation to the CPD program on authentic teaching, learning and assessment strategies for ODL, Atlas for ODL, at the Faculty of Education of the Open University of Sri Lanka. On behalf of the Faculty of Education, I am very pleased to welcome you all. I would like to warmly welcome Professor Thomas C. Reeves, or as he is very well known, Professor Tom Reeves, who has very kindly accepted my invitation and agreed to conduct today's webinar. He is an eminent scholar and an esteemed professional in the field of educational technology, and I'm greatly honored to introduce him to you today. Dr. Tom Reeves is Professor Emeritus of Learning, Design and Technology in the College of Education at the University of Georgia in the USA. He obtained his PhD at Syracuse University, USA, and with his extensive professional experience over 5 decades, especially in planning, conducting, and reporting evaluations, instructional design, and educational design research, Professor Reeves is continuously supporting institutions around the globe in various ways. He's a former Fulbright lecturer in Peru, and he has been an invited speaker in the USA and more than 30 other countries. In 2003, Professor Reeves received the AACE Fellowship Award from the Association for the Advancement of Computing in Education. In 2010, he was made a fellow of the Australasian Society of Computers in Learning in Tertiary Education. And in 2013, he received the David H. Jonassen Excellence in Research Award from the Association for Educational Communications and Technology, AECT. Being an active researcher, Professor Reeves has a vast number of publications to his credit, including books, book chapters, journal articles, conference papers, etc. His 2 most recent books are Conducting Educational Design Research, 2019 with Susan McNee, which I have ordered and now available in our USL library as well. The other book, the recent book in 2020 with Kees Ankert, Bonk and Tom Reynolds, it's MOOCs and Open Education in the Global South, in which I am proud to have an article published with Som Naidu. When I was widely reading and referencing Professor Tom Reeves' publications during my doctoral studies at Wollongong, Australia, 2 decades ago, I never imagined, I never thought I would be introducing Professor Tom Reeves to my colleagues in Sri Lanka in a forum like this. So it's a great honor for me. And once again, I am very grateful to Professor Tom Reeves for accepting my request to share his inspiring thoughts and experiences with us today on this most relevant and significant topic, creating authentic online learning through educational design research. Definitely, this will be a very interesting and valuable experience for all of us. May I now kindly invite Professor Tom Reeves to commence the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that generous introduction, Professor Karunaranaka. It's just wonderful to be here with everyone. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see my slides for today. And it looks like it's another lovely day in paradise, Sri Lanka. It's a little warmer there than it is here. We have lovely weather today. It's sunny, and I think it's going to be 21 centigrade when things are all said and done. Can you see my slide okay? Yes, great. So yes, we are, and I'm so happy to be visiting you. I've never been to Sri Lanka. The closest I've been, I guess I did some volunteer work in India a number of years ago in Pune, but I've never been to your lovely island and hope to. It's on my bucket list for sure. But I'm going to talk to you today about some work that I've been doing with the World Health Organization to design authentic online learning. And we use a particular strategy, educational design research. And you can see here my primary collaborators. This picture was taken in Turkey a few years ago. Just to give you a little background, I live in Athens, Georgia. It's a university town here in the southern United States. And my wife is a professor emeritus of social work. And we have two little dogs named Button and Zipper. The University of Georgia is the oldest public university in the United States, founded in 1785. And since I retired in 2010, I've been doing a lot of work with the World Health Organization and getting to travel all over the world and doing workshops on how to design courses and also how to teach. And most of the people in these courses are professionals. So they're physicians and pharmacists and public health inspectors. Many of them have doctorates. So they're professionals, but they've never really learned how to teach or how to design a learning experience. So let's talk about research. Let's compare medical research with educational research. Medical research has enjoyed unbelievable progress in recent years. For example, in the United States, there's been a 70% decline in the US death rate from cardiovascular disease over the past 50 years. There's been a drop of more than 1% annually in the cancer death rate over the past 20 years. And life expectancy for a baby born in the United States has risen from 47 years in 1900 to more than 78 years ago today. Actually, yesterday it was announced that that has declined by a whole year, the average lifespan, because of the coronavirus. And in fact, last night there was a commemoration of 500,000 people have died in the United States from this pandemic. I noticed that Sri Lanka, you've only had 450 deaths. That's just amazing. You've done such a better job. The United States has done such a terrible job with this pandemic. So what about education? Well, unfortunately, education hasn't made the kind of progress that's been made in medical research. Educational research hasn't had much impact on education. In fact, here we are during the pandemic, so many learners are forced online, and you think we would have been prepared, but we really haven't. And the evidence is that we're losing tens of thousands of students just aren't even in school now. And online learning in particular has proven to be very stressful for a lot of our young learners and for their parents who are stressed out trying to keep their kids engaged in this type of learning. And when you see a magazine cover about education in the United States, generally it's not good news. It's things like standardized testing, punitive accountability, and school choice have all utterly failed. Nearly half of US students qualify for free or reduced price lunches, and federal and state investments in higher education have greatly declined while the costs have dramatically increased. So it's very, very worrisome. Now, part of the problem is that there's an imbalance between the emphasis on relevance of the research we do in education and the rigor. Some people want there to be lots and lots of rigor. For example, Robert Slavin, who's a professor at Johns Hopkins University, he is an advocate of having educational researchers emulate randomized controlled trials as they use in medical education. And so he says there's only 5 questions you need to ask about an educational research study. Is there a control group? Are the control and experimental groups assigned randomly? If a matched study, are the groups extremely similar? Is the sample size large enough, and are the results statistically significant? So there's one group of educational researchers really emphasize rigor, but and rigor is necessary. We want rigor. We wouldn't be as far as we are with the coronavirus vaccines and so forth without rigor in traditional randomized controlled trials. I've been very fortunate. I've already had both of the Pfizer vaccines because of my age. I'm 73. Is this method appropriate for education? That's one of the things we need to consider. Charles DeForges, who's also has written books about educational research, he's in the UK. He says the status of research deemed educational would have to be judged first in terms of its discipline quality, and that's the rigor, discipline quality, and secondly, in terms of its impact. Poor discipline, poor rigor is no discipline. We can all agree about that. And excellent research without impact is not educational. And that's where the difference comes, because so much of the rigorous experimental research has very little impact on the way people teach and learn online, face-to-face, blended, whatever it happens to be. And this is particularly troublesome in educational technology research, where we're plagued with a history of no significant differences. I used to be the editor of one of these journals, and I've published in many of them, but these journals are full of research that basically is comparing one way of teaching with technology or online or blended or with some hot new innovation with traditional instruction, and all too often the results are no significant differences. And so there's a gap between the academic research that professors and graduate students do and the educational practice that goes on. In educational technology, we put too much emphasis on researching things, whatever the latest thing is, 3D printers, iPads, smartphones, virtual reality, etc. Whenever a new thing comes out, you can fully expect that there's going to be a series of experimental studies that will compare this new thing with the traditional way, and often we find no significant differences. So I think we need more research on problems. We need to do our research focused on what are the problems. Ineffective teaching, poor learner motivation. We're seeing how poorly people are engaged in online learning in the wake of this pandemic. Little preparation for real world problems, performance, insufficient time on task, lots and lots of serious educational problems out there. So in order to address this problem, Susan McKinney, who's a professor at the University of Twente in the Netherlands, and I wrote this book, Conducting Educational Design Research. This is actually the second edition. The first edition came out in 2012. And it's been translated into a couple of languages, just came out in Japanese. But Susan and I have worked together for decades. I knew her when she was a graduate student. She came to spend some time at the University of Georgia, and we've been collaborators ever since. And educational design research is not defined by its methods, but by its goals. And it has twofold goals. One, you want to develop a robust program, product, or policy that addresses a serious educational problem. And you also simultaneously want to develop reusable knowledge theory such as design principles. So this is a high-level overview of educational design research, and then we'll go and see some examples. So the first thing you'd want to do is, in close collaboration with practitioners, define an important pedagogical outcome. Let's say we want to engage girls in Sri Lanka in STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. That's our pedagogical goal. There aren't enough girls going into these fields. And then you would create a prototype learning environment informed by the best theory that's out there and the best practice, the best design work that's out there. And you'd emphasize content and pedagogy rather than technology alone. And you'd want to give special attention to supporting human interactions, because it's the human interactions that really push learning, enable learning. Then you would test, refine, and retest this learning environment, go through multiple iterations until the learning outcome is reached. And you want to refine theory simultaneously with the testing and refinement of the learning environment. This is our model that we developed to represent this process, and it goes through various phases of analysis and exploration, where you're really trying to understand the problem, both from the point of view of the literature and theory, but also from the point of view of the practitioners who own the problem, who really are the ones experiencing the problem. Then you go through a phase of design and construction of your prototype innovation. And then you go through a phase of evaluation and reflection. And this is where the representation of the model, I think, is a little weak, because you actually go through multiple iterations of evaluation and reflection. And in the end, what you hope to have is a mature intervention, a mature innovation, and new theoretical understanding, usually in the form of design principles. And I'll illustrate what I mean by a design principle for online learning a little bit later. At the same time, you're paying attention to things like implementation and spread. How will this innovation that you developed in one context, how could it be used in other contexts? So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. EDUCAUSE Review is an online journal. EDUCAUSE is a very large association, professional association. And they published a paper in 2015 called Paper or Tablet: Reading, Recall, and Comprehension. And this study was based on a doctoral dissertation done here in the United States. And it was done, the study was conducted at the Coast Guard Training Academy within the context of their senior enlisted leadership course. And what they had done, they bought a bunch of tablets for the people enrolled in these courses. And so the research question was, do people learn better from reading on a tablet, or do they learn more from reading on paper or tablet? So because this was a military context, they could use an experimental design. They had 231 students randomly assigned to either a digital version of a paper or a paper version. These students, by the way, are non-commissioned officers in the US Coast Guard. The reading they were doing was only an 800-word article about leadership. So the treatment time for this study was less than 10 minutes. And the outcome measures they used, and again, they randomly assigned them pre and post. So they used 10 multiple choice items to measure recall accuracy and 2 short essay questions to measure comprehension. And what do you think they found? Of course, they found no significant differences. Why would there be a difference? I mean, reading is reading. It doesn't matter whether you're reading it on a tablet or a piece of paper. And when you look at the ridiculously short time of the treatment, 10 minutes, an 800-word article. So how would this kind of study be done if we did educational design research instead? Well, first we go through the various phases, and I'll use this model to illustrate this. One of the first things I'd want to know is, what's the problem? What is the problem that, why are you doing this study? Is it because people aren't doing the readings, or the readings are not aligned with the assessments? What is the problem in the first place? And so I'd want to know that. And so I'd go through a phase of analysis and exploration. I'd look at the literature, I'd do interviews and observations on site, I'd work closely with practitioners to really analyze and explore the situation and come to understand the problem. And then I would start to build a learning environment to address this. And we'd want to make sure that 7 critical factors are aligned. And this is something we need to make sure is aligned in any kind of learning environment, whether it's online, whether it's blended, whether it's in a classroom. These 7 factors are absolutely critical. The learning objectives, the content, the instructional design, the learner tasks, what are the learners going to do, the faculty roles, the technology roles, and the assessment. Now, in another book I wrote about authentic learning, I really think that we need to approach to aim for higher order, robust learning objectives. And most content is complex, and so you should address it from multiple perspectives. The instructional design ideally is experiential learning. The learner tasks should be authentic tasks, real world tasks that they would be involved in. The role of the faculty is more as a mentor or facilitator than an instructor or didactic lecturer. The role of the technology could be to foster communications or realistic simulations. You'd have to define that in a particular context. And then the assessment should focus on those higher order objectives. So for example, the mental models that someone might have of what it means to be a Coast Guard officer. Then I would build my prototype solution. So you go through a phase of design and construction. We've already seen that reading on a tablet really is not any better than reading on paper. And so maybe they're using the tablets because it saves printing cost, or who knows why. But tablets have lots of other affordances. They have affordances for simulations. So for example, one of the things that Coast Guard today around the world faces is migrants who are on overloaded boats. Well, how do you safely unload people in these boats so that they don't drown? There you could have a simulation, and you could really use the affordances of the tablet to help people learn those particular strategies. Then we go through multiple phases of testing and refinement, the evaluation and reflection phase, and to try to maximize the value of having these tablets within this particular context. And in the end, you'd like to think you have a mature intervention and enhanced theoretical understanding. So educational design research is driven by the desire for impact on real world problems. Now, when I worked for many years with my PhD students, I always tried to get them to focus on serious outcomes. And one of the places I've used in the last 20 years or so has been the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is the most recent iteration. And the particular study I'm going to show you as an example of educational design research was focused on good health and well-being. So here's the problem: vaccine quality management. Right now, this is a problem that's in everybody's minds because I got the Pfizer vaccine. The Pfizer vaccine has to be kept at extremely low temperatures. And so you have a problem that's called the cold chain problem. The cold chain means that, let's say the vaccine is manufactured in a city in India, and then it has to get to a remote village in Sri Lanka. Well, the entire time that vaccine is manufactured and then stored and then, say, flown to Sri Lanka and stored in a warehouse and then eventually taken maybe on the back of a motorcycle to a remote village, it has to be kept at a very cold temperature. Regular vaccines are between 4 and 8 degrees centigrade, but these new vaccines, many of them have to be much colder. And so the World Health Organization has been aware of this problem for a long, long time. And for about 15 years, they ran a course called Pharmaceutical Cold Chain Management on Wheels. And I went on this course, and they take professionals who are in charge of the cold chain management in their countries, and they put them on a bus and they travel down the cold chain in Turkey. Turns out Turkey has one of the very best vaccine management systems in the world. They have very high rates of inoculation, and you'll have access to these slides, and you can go out and explore some of the videos and so forth. We don't have time to go through all of them, but you can look at them at your own leisure. So this was the course that I was on in 2014. And so we had learners, again, who are professionals from all over the world. Many of them were some from India, there was sub-Saharan Africa, Vietnam, and other places. And we traveled down the cold chain. So we got on the bus in Izmir, where we visited a large warehouse where vaccines are stored. We visited a university hospital. We went to a provincial vaccine store and a family health center, and eventually to retail pharmacies and small warehouse. So over a week's period, we traveled down the cold chain. And the learners were put into groups of 3, and during the week together, they would work on how they're going to improve the cold chain management in their home countries. So you see one of the groups, and they're working on the bus as we traveled down the cold chain. We would always engage the learners in daily activities, like showing the plan of the day or doing the evaluation of the day or leading warm-up exercises and that sort of thing. And there were a lot of authentic tasks involved in this week-long course. For example, on day 1, the teams, the 3-person teams, were given vials of vaccine. And they had to store those vials of vaccine and they had all kinds of different options, all kinds of different materials for storing the vaccines. And then the vaccines were put underneath the bus. And at the end of the week, they were taken out. And so you could see if their vaccines had been stored properly and were still viable vaccines. And as we traveled down these and visited these various sites, we would go in and visit warehouses and cold storage rooms and pharmacies and public health and family health centers and so forth. Here we are in a commercial pharmacy. And eventually we would get right down to the point where people are getting their inoculations, in this case, a young child. So we saw the end as well. At the end of each day, we would form an informal classroom. We'd go into a tea house or coffee house or a restaurant and set up a classroom, and the groups would share what they learned during the day and what they would do to improve the cold chain management in their home country. So this is really experiential learning at its best. And at the end of the week together, and you can go out and see the testimonies in this video, you can go out and see how emotional and powerful the learning experience was. Most of these folks had never learned this way. They'd never experienced real, authentic, experiential learning of this kind. So the problem that we had was they could only run this course once a year and only had about 15 learners on the bus. And there were hundreds and if not thousands of people who needed this course. And so we wanted to try to convert it into an online course, an e-learning environment. And so the question was, how do you fit a bus into a computer screen? That was our challenge. So my main collaborator at the World Health Organization had gotten a copy of this book that I wrote in 2010, I think it was, with Jan Harrington and Ron Oliver. Jan Harrington, by the way, was at the University of Wollongong for a long time. And Ron Oliver was at Edith Cowan University. I started working with them back in 1993 when I spent 5 months in Australia. And in this book, we have a theoretical framework for authentic online learning. And we have 9 critical principles. I don't have time to go into all of these, but I'll just illustrate them, how we use them in this new online course. And this was the primary team of researchers. So on the left, Dr. Umut Kurtoglu is with the World Health Organization, or he's now retired from the WHO, but he was at this time. And he lives in Geneva, but he's from Turkey originally. Jim Vesper is someone I've known for many, many years, and he was my PhD student. And Jan Harrington and I co-supervised his doctoral research. So this is the other side of the research team, Jim, the doctoral student, Jan Harrington, my collaborator, co-supervisor, and myself. We would meet around the world in various places, and this is when we were meeting in Antalya, Turkey, to do some of the early e-learning design. And there you see Umut and Jim and myself, and also Gökhan Gürses, who was the main developer of the course in Turkey. Sometimes we would meet here in Georgia. This is in Georgia, where we were having a working session. We also had some experts in from London and from Chicago to help develop this course. You can go out and take a look at the course, and our motto is Go Authentic. And so you can look at the e-pharmaceutical cold chain management course through that link. But let me tell you a little bit about it. Again, going back to those learning objectives and content, instructional design, learner tasks, teacher or facilitator roles, technology roles, and assessment. In this particular course, we were definitely aimed at higher order objectives. We're trying to get people to understand the cold chain and how to manage that cold chain. It's a very complex topic. You can imagine that managing the cold chain in Sri Lanka would be very different from the challenges involved in managing the cold chain in Finland or in Vietnam or wherever. The local conditions and so forth vary quite a bit. So it's a complex topic. You'd want them to be introduced to multiple perspectives. We stressed experiential learning, an authentic task. The facilitators were mentors and guides in this course. The technology facilitated communication and collaboration, and we were aiming for high-level mental models in the assessment. So to give you another view on the objectives, most of the objectives were at the higher end of the objectives hierarchy. So we know that, a lot of learning is at remembering, understanding, and applying, but what's really important is analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And that's where we were. We had higher order, robust objectives. The nature of the content was multiple perspectives. So just as on the real bus course, we visited lots of different types of facilities, in the online course, we also visited large storage places, hospitals, pharmacies, health centers, etc. And so the course lasted 12 weeks. The last 5 weeks of the course was a real world authentic task. The students were assigned to work with a developing country to help them develop a better cold chain management system. So let's say the country is Romania. Our learners in our course would work with the public health people in Romania to improve their cold chain management. Now, again, remember these learners, they're professionals, they're physicians, they're nurse practitioners, they're pharmacists, they're public health inspectors and so forth. So they're professionals. And so the first 7 weeks they learned through these simulated tasks, and then the last 5 weeks was a real world task. We stressed experiential learning, and they had lots of tasks to do. For example, they were told, we've got to get these vaccines from this warehouse to this remote village, but your refrigerated truck has broken down and you have to find alternative transportation. And so how will you find alternative transportation? How will you package the vaccines so they're still good when they get to the remote village? And so the learners working in teams of 3 would try to work out solutions to that problem. And so they worked in collaboration with each other. So 3-person teams. Here you see 2 of the teams. There's a learner there from Russia, Sri Lanka. I forgot that. Yeah, there's a learner there from Sri Lanka in Colombo, and a learner from India. That was one of the teams, Russia, Sri Lanka, India. Another team was Cuba, USA, and Ghana. And so the 15 learners or 25 learners or however many we would have in the online courses would again be put in teams of 3 to work together. And their tasks were authentic tasks, and we used lots of things like Google Drive and other types of resources to enable them to collaboratively solve simulated problems the first 7 weeks, and then a real world problem the last 5 weeks. The instructors in the course, people like Umit and Kevin and Jim, and Andrew, they were mentors, facilitators. And so we'd have online chat, and they had lots of well-produced videos about various things about managing the cold chain and so forth. There were also real-world tasks. For example, there's a way of examining a vaccine to see whether or not it's been frozen. And it's called the shake test. And you literally shake a vial of vaccine and you watch it and how the sediment falls, and then you can tell whether or not it's been frozen. So what we did is we shipped vials of vaccine to people who were enrolled in the course, and they had to produce a video of themselves doing the shake test and identifying which vaccines were frozen and which had not been frozen. And that turned out to be a good experiential learning task for them. And again, the assessment was focused on this overall desire to have a strong mental model and be able to apply the understanding of cold chain management. And so the last 5 weeks was focused on, for a given client, conduct a critical analysis of the cold chain management system and make recommendations to improve the performance of the system in line with good distribution practices and good storage practices. So that was the real world assessment. So again, you see that these variables that in any type of online course, open online course, we need to make sure these things are well aligned. Your objectives, your content, your instructional design, the learner task, the facilitator's roles, the technology roles, and the assessment. You know, the first thing when I get involved in an instructional design project, first thing I always ask is, you know, what are the learners going to be able to do after they've taken this course? Tell me about the task. What are the authentic things they can do? And that's where I start, you know, the process. And, you know, I used to teach at the Medical University of South Carolina. And I remember working with a physician there in my first couple of weeks. And I said, well, what are your learning objectives? And he said, well, I didn't have learning objectives when I was in medical school, and I'm not going to have any now. which was kind of an interesting place to be. So then I learned to say, not what are your learning objectives, but what do you want people to be able to do? What are their tasks that they'll be able to do? So the bus course, as I mentioned, had an emotional ending with real tears. People, had spent a whole week together, and they, were very, very emotional about the course being over. And so my dream is that we'll someday have online learning be so good that people will cry at the end of an online course. That's when it'll truly become authentic. Now, how did we use educational design research in this to get to that mature intervention and theoretical understanding? Well, Jim Vesper, my PhD student, did a lot of different things throughout the project. For example, this was the initial screen design that they came up with for the course. And it's very cute, but we found out by what Jim brought in experts to look at this and had people who would be learners look at it and so forth. And they said that it's just too confusing. And so the eventual course looks like this. You've got your map right in the middle. You've got your task that you're going to do on the right side. At the bottom, you have all your resources. And so it's a very different design. That came from lots of formative evaluation. Now, out of the research that Jim did, he came up with 9 design principles. I'm only going to show you 3 of them. One of them is, rather than perfectly duplicate, replicate where possible, and innovate where necessary. So I mentioned that in the real bus course, on the day 1, they pack vaccines in different packages and they're put underneath the bus. And at the end of the week, they're taken out and you see which vaccine survived. And we couldn't do that on the online course. So we did other things. As I mentioned, we had them actually video themselves doing the shake test. So that they could learn this important strategy. The second design principle was the collaboration that's essential to instantiating authentic task-based learning strategies online is a new experience for most learners, and it has to be carefully nurtured. So we learned through this study that we really need to spend a lot of time helping these groups to come together. So in the initial weeks of the course, we would have different games that we play online and other types of activities so that they could come together as teams that could work together. And that was really important. The third design principle was the fidelity of the simulated experiential learning environment does not have to be high as long as it enables learners to suspend disbelief and feel like what they're experiencing is real. So the people in Turkey who produced the course did a wonderful job of producing very high quality videos where you could go into a storage facility and literally zoom in and go right down to the level of an individual vial of vaccine and read the label and so forth. And the learners had very positive reactions to this. The videos, the facilities tour, you almost feel like you're walking with the camera. This is something that makes the course so lively. So the good news is the course has won lots of awards, and we've gone on to use this design in other courses. In fact, I can send you an article about another course we did in Indonesia for a whole different problem. But uses this same authentic task design. I can send you an article about that. But the course has won awards in various contexts. And Jim Vesper, my doctoral student, got his PhD, and the graduation ceremony was in Australia. I wasn't able to go this time, but there he is with Jan Harrington. And Jim, I encouraged Jim to submit his dissertation to the Association for Talent Development, which is a huge organization. And he won the Dissertation of the Year award, got a cash prize. They flew him out to Denver, Colorado to get his award and so forth. So it was a very successful doctoral dissertation. So I want to leave a few minutes for questions. So I want to just end with, I think educational design research enables a balance between relevance and rigor that's socially responsible. In education, we need to do socially responsible research that is focused on the real world problems that practitioners face day in and day out. So don't waste your life. Do educational design research. This picture was taken in Australia, where the sign was basically said, don't go swimming because there's crocodiles. So there, you can go to my website, evaluateitnow.com, to get more information, and there's my email address and so forth. But let me stop sharing my screen and open it up for some questions.
So let me then take up this opportunity to give our heartiest gratitude on behalf of the Faculty of Education and on behalf of the Open University of Sri Lanka, Professor Tom Reeves, for taking time off your schedule. So I'm really, really grateful for your, accepting our invitation. And I'm very positive, our audience, though it's a small number because of the time, I think, though there were a lot of people who registered, this time slot is a little bit difficult sometimes. Anyway, I'm actually, I hope we can collaborate with you in something in the future, hopefully.
That would be lovely.
Yeah, we'll see, because now we are more and more onto this authentic, and that's my real interest as well. And as you know, I have done some DBR research, 2 PhDs completed, and 1 PhD student is here in the audience, I believe. So I'm promoting EDR and DBR, so we'll be, I'm sure we can get your support and advice more on these aspects. Then thank you so much.
Thank you. You all have a very good rest of your evening and a beautiful tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much.